A lot of patients who come in who are on narcotics have disability of one type or another. Whether they're actually genuinely disabled in the context of, say, 50 or 80 or 100 years ago, when our parents and grandparents had stricter criteria for disabilities, is a valid question. But we live in the time we live in. That being said, a lot of my patients are getting payments, and you could consider it reward in a sense, for not working. We have a time now that I think George Washington and our founding fathers would have had a hard time conceiving, where people get unemployment money. There have been instances in the past where people on farms are paid not to grow crops. The argument for people being paid when they're not working for unemployment is that they're looking for jobs. But a lot of times what happens is that people extend the time that they take to look for a job because they have unemployment. They don't necessarily have the same impetus to go back to work. Beyond that, there's disability. And a lot of my patients have problems they feel going back to work. And I think that some of those can be very valid. I think that disability was designed for situations where people are severely mentally challenged, say, blindness, after a stroke or after a severe heart attack, where they can't physically do any type of work. The fact of the matter is that most of my patients would probably agree with this, between me, themselves and the walls in private, that they are actually quite capable. A good fraction of people doing narcotics have very great capabilities in procuring those narcotics. That is essentially almost a full-time job for many people. If they're taking $100 a day worth of narcotics, they are collecting in one form or another, say $40,000 a year in tax-free or post-tax income. And that's a full-time job for most people. And that's not even including the money they would spend for their food, clothing, rent and whatnot. So that's money that they're able to secure and procure just for drug usage. So these are oftentimes people who are otherwise disabled, yet they somehow manage to find enough money and time to get their drugs and drug money and so forth. Now, a lot of the behaviors and activities they're doing are not what we would consider to be top-line great behaviors: shoplifting, scamming, stealing, credit card fraud, begging, borrowing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are not what we ordinarily consider to be productive and fruitful lines of work, but they are getting people their drugs, and they're keeping people very busy and occupied. And that mental ability and the ability to run around and make small-term drug deals and so forth could easily be applied to real jobs if people were so motivated. What happens many times is that somebody is on a disability, they're getting a check, they're getting free health insurance via the state in the form of Medicare, Medicaid, and there's not necessarily that much incentive, especially if there's food stamps, free housing, and whatnot, for people to actually make the effort to get back to work. In fact, there's oftentimes a big disincentive when people are on Medicare, SSDI, disability. They're told by the state that they can work no more than 20 hours a week or they're going to lose all their benefits. They don't want to lose their insurance because that's been the ticket to having detoxes paid for, oftentimes methadone treatment, there's Suboxone and so forth. So there's a lot of incentive for people to stay on this system of getting disability payments. In point of fact, they would probably do better mentally. A lot of them are on disability for bipolar and anxiety or depression, or even some aspects of the drug use. I don't know which is the chicken and the egg, which one came first. A lot of people are anxious and depressed before they started doing drugs. A lot of people are anxious and depressed because they've done drugs, because they've in other ways ruined the foundations of their lives. I do know that people would do better staying away from drugs in the future once we're able to get them off drugs, if they are productive in a gainful, honest, straightforward line of work. And a lot of times they can take their scamming and scheming and scrounging and running around for drugs, that kind of behavior, they can take that and put that to any number of honest lines of work. A lot of people say they have a back problem, they can't, they might have been a hairdresser or a mason or something like that, and they can't do some type of physical work because they have neck pain and so forth. In point of fact, most of the time I think that people are actually mostly better from the things that they had acutely. that might have brought about their disability. They've been on narcotics for a while, and they tend to get some worsening of their symptoms when their narcotic dose drains from them, and they tend to feel a little bit better when they get their narcotic medication. So a lot of them are taking narcotics for pain reduction and as pain pills, but I think that the initial real pain has probably gone away for most of them, and what has carried on as in terms of their pain treatment is just fixing the withdrawal symptoms that they have. It's a little bit like what I've talked about before, borrowing money. So they pretty much get relief, they get pleasure from their narcotic, they get pain relief. When the narcotic seeps out of their system within 24 hours or so, then they're having pain, whatever. And wherever they might have had their original injury, in back or neck, they tend to get pain concentrated in those areas, and they think, oh, that's my problem, I'm still having the back pain. When in reality, once if they were able to taper off gradually, and my own work clinically has shown this, that they pretty much don't have any more pain than they have even at their maximal drug dose. That is to say, when they're getting their most narcotic, if you taper them gradually, they will feel just like that. I'm not going to make people perfect. I'm not going to make people have no anxiety and people have no aches or pains or wherever they are, but for the most part, we can get people to a stable situation where they can be gainfully employed, productive in the general society, producing and doing better for themselves and their families, and less likely to go back to drugs.